Hey everybody, welcome back to another lesson here on YouTube. My name is David Ryshpan, and we're going to look at my most recent participation in loop sessions. This is for Beat Brasilis, or Loop Session Sao Paulo, number 261. They've been running every Wednesday online since the beginning of the pandemic, and we're going to take a look at the logic session for my most recent beat for them. If you enjoy the content on this channel, please like and subscribe. It's the easiest way to grow the channel and to show your support. Follow me on other social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram. Everything is at Ryshpan Music. And if you're feeling particularly generous, please go over to Patreon to support the channel financially. You can access additional bonus content. I'm actually running a new project, starting a new project with my band Trio Bruxo. Over on Patreon, you can check out all kinds of exclusive content there. So let's dive into the session. So the first thing I do is load the record into my session, and I switch it to beats and time mode in Logic in the display so I can see the timing of the samples I've already decided I want to use. So this first chunk that I'm going to select is around 7 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm just going through to find the exact section that I want. And I like to use the split by playhead command. I put my playhead at the beginning of the section that I want, and then I go all the way to the end of the section that I might possibly use. And then I chop the end of it with split by playhead again. I find that's a little more accurate than a scissors command or anything. And now I'm going to fast forward to the main section I identified that I want to use, which is around 30 minutes. And again, I'm going to zoom in to the beginning of the section. And once I find it, I'm going to try and cut as close to the transient as I can with split by playhead on the transient, and then I'm going to go to the end of the section that I want to use and split by playhead again. And now I have that whole section isolated, and I will chop it up into smaller pieces later, but I'm just taking the sections of samples that I've already decided I want to use. Now I'm just going through the rest of the track. Here I'm actually finding the same harmonic section again. It's pre-chorus, but in a disco record or an R&B record, sometimes the same part or the same section of a tune might have a different performance characteristic, a different performance quality, maybe a different lyric that I want to sample instead. So I'm going to take both instances of that section and then chop it up and see what it gives me. Now I'm fast forwarding through the rest of the track just to see if there's any other little section that I may or may not want to use. I'd rather have too much material to draw from and not use it than be in the middle of the production and realize I still need something or I don't have enough, and then I have to go back. So now I'm just deleting everything that I'm not going to use, and I'm grouping all the samples together, and we're going to start producing. When I am working on a more sample heavy project, I prefer to do all my chops first and then lay the drums around it. So you'll see I'm naming these tracks stabs for the brass stabs, and then the main loop or the main chop, and I've separated them onto two separate tracks. And now I'm collapsing the project size to 1:30. Now we have all of the chops done, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to filter out some of the low end of the samples. I know for sure I'm definitely going to add kick drum, additional kick drum, and I'm going to add additional synth bass probably. So I want to clear out the low end of these samples so that the low end that I'm adding has a place to live inside of the track without the samples muddying it up. All right, so I'm going to pull up a new plugin for me, a relatively new plugin for me, the Black Rooster Audio VHL3C. which is just a low pass and high pass filter. And on the stabs, I'm going to cut out everything below 250 because I don't need it. They're brass stabs, they're horns. There's nothing important there under 250. And for the main loop, I'm going to roll it off at 150. There's some bass stuff, some low end of the toms and the vocals that I still want to have, but I don't want it muddying up my kick and my synth bass. So here are my chops before the filter. And here are my chops after the filter. So now I'm going to work on an ending. I know that I kind of want to explode this ending as a fade out with a filter sweep and some delay throws and reverbs. So I'm going to pull up the Arturia mini filter, and I'm just going to put a basic LFO, very slow, and with just enough resonance that you can tell it's filtered, and a little bit of low pass because the LFO will animate where the filter cutoff point is. So now we've got our filter effect set. Here it is with just the filter alone. So now I've got the filter dialed where I want it. Now I'm going to add the delay throw and the ambience at the end. So let's pull up Native Instruments Guitar Rig. This is still Guitar Rig Pro 5. They've come out with Guitar Rig Pro 6. Let's pull up a tractor delay and the ice verb. And the reason I decided to use Guitar Rig is because it's one plugin, and in Logic I can just automate both of them inside of the plugin. So I'm going to throw the delay into the reverb just to catch that last phrase of the sample, and that sounds like this on its own. Okay, let's go track by track for the rest of the session. I use Native Instruments Battery 4 for my drums, and I built a custom kit for this out of other samples that I have. I wound up not using that rim click, so let's go instrument by instrument. Here's my kick, which is a layer of two different kicks, a deep layer kick that I found hiding on my hard drive, and a Jake 1 kick. The snare is a layer of three different elements from different sample libraries, and you'll see the clap is only on the highest velocity. And then I have my hi-hats, which I'm filtering inside of Battery with the S1200 filters. And I'm just cleaning out all of the low end that might still be in the sample. Hi-hats don't need to have low end. I don't need it there. So I'm just cleaning up all of the low end in the hi-hat samples. And each cell I'm sending out to its own individual track in Logic. On the kick, I have the Waves PwigTech, which is their Pultec emulation. And I have the snare going through the Waves API 550 EQ, just basically boosting everything a little bit. And then the kick and snare are going out to a bus, which has the Pwig Child, the Fairchild emulation, just for kick and snare, kind of crushing that kick and snare, and I'm blending it back in parallel. It's about -4 dB under the main drum grooves. The hi-hats are not processed at all, besides what I did in Battery. For the synth bass, I pulled up Arturia's Prophet 5, and I'm using essentially a preset that I've modified a little bit, that I have now made monophonic with legato on to kind of give it a more mini Moog style response. And that synth is running through my favorite amp plugin right now, Softtube's upgraded Amp Room. And the bass cabs in this sound fantastic. So I'm running through the American Class A EQ as kind of a preamp, quote unquote, as the tone stack of the amp, and it's going into the 8x10 emulation with 3 different mics on it, and that beefs up the low end of the Prophet 5 and rolls off some of the highs and gives it additional saturation and character, and basically makes it sit the way I want to in the mix. I'm scooping out 50 hertz in the American Class A because I'm boosting 50 and 60 on the Pultec on the kick. So I'm getting the Prophet and the kicks to kind of agree with each other. I wanted some additional low end, so I grabbed my favorite tuned 808 patch, which is in Native's Massive X. It's called Essential 8. And you'll see I'm rolling off the cutoff, rolling back the release. I don't want a huge long 808. I just want some additional sub under my Prophet. I'm running that through Wave Studio Rack, which in this particular case is basically just another Puig Tech, but Damian Lewis and his 808 Toolkit preset have the Puig Tech dialed in exactly where I want it, where I like it for this track. So I'm using that version in this case. Now I'm busting out all of my samples, all of my sample tracks to their own bus, on which I've put the Arturia 1073 emulation, just to give it a little bit of warmth. Also cutting out any extraneous low-end rumble with another 50 hertz cutoff. And then I'm running it through Waves Vitamin just to spread out the frequencies, spread it in the stereo field a little bit more. And then finally a limiter on the end, the L1. Beat Brasilis hosts their hangouts over Twitch, and this is being broadcast over the internet, so I just want to bring the level up to sound good and loud over a Twitch broadcast. So that's what the limiter's for. You'll notice I'm not using a ton of compression or a ton of effects. I've affected the drums. The drums that I chose in this particular beat, I spent more time choosing the sounds that I wanted to use, so that I wouldn't have to EQ and compress them and do a lot of production on them after. When you combine samples and you are more specific about the sound palette at the beginning that you want to use, you can often save time having to mix or remix them later. A lot of sample packs are already produced and run through all kinds of outboard effects to give them the sound that they have. This record that we used, the record of the day, is also a really well-produced, beautiful sounding record. And I found just in transposing the chops and transposing the samples, that also gave the samples the EQ characteristics I needed. And all I had to do was just clean out the low end. So I hope that's helpful to you. I would definitely recommend looking up a Loop Sessions in your area. Most, if not all of them, are online these days. When the pandemic subsides, they will go back to being in person, although I imagine some of them might still continue to be online as well. Having this deadline and this community to be creative within and to chat with and to share ideas with has been super helpful for me throughout this pandemic. So if you're into production and beat making, I would definitely suggest looking up a Loop Sessions near you. And I hope you stay healthy and creative. Once again, please click like and subscribe on this video if you enjoyed it, if you enjoy the content on this channel and you want to see it grow. Follow me on other social media platforms, including Instagram and Facebook. And if you're feeling really generous and you're in a position to donate, please support the channel financially by going over to my Patreon. You can get access to exclusive content, PDFs, and I'm starting on the Patreon a new project with my band Trio Brucho. We will be in residency in November, so you get to see me compose from start to finish through the month of October over on Patreon. Take care, stay safe, stay healthy, stay creative. See you next week.